is Aegon the First Targaryen? Game of Thrones, history, House of the Dragon, legend and controversy surrounded the man whose name would reverberate through the corridors of Westeros for generations to come, Aegon Targaryen. For some, he embodied Aegon the Conqueror, a dragon lord who united kingdoms and carved out his path across a continent. To others, he was known as Aegon the Dragon, a flaming despot whose terrifyingly powerful winged creatures could conquer entire civilizations. Aegon was of Valyrian heritage and was born on the volcanic island of Dragonstone. His family was known as House Targaryen. The Targaryens, in contrast to the rest of Westeros, possessed dragons as a hidden weapon, massive and fire-breathing. These majestic animals were a fearsome force that the Seven Kingdoms had never seen before. Balerion the Black Dread, Meraxes, and Vhagar were the dragons that Aegon and his two sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, rode, respectively. Bards sing the stories of Aegon's conquest and whisper in taverns by the light of the fire. Many assert that he was motivated by a vision of a powerful foe emerging in the frigid north, which could only be vanquished by a unified Westeros. The holy men of Westeros, known as Septons, saw things differently. They talked of a haughtiness born of Valyrian blood, a desire for domination fed by dragon strength. Aegon, a young man not out of his teens, set his sights on the Iron Throne, the seat of power in King's Landing, the capital of the continent. Whatever his intentions, the first to feel the wrath of the dragons was Harren the Black, king of the Iron Islands. Aegon's dragons rained down fire from the sky, melting the very stone and turning Harrenhal into a twisted monument of defeat. This act of devastating power sent shockwaves through Westeros, striking fear into the hearts of other rulers. It was a brutal baptism by fire, a stark display of the Targaryen advantage. Aegon didn't just impose its will on its enemies. The splendor of his dragons frequently overwhelmed his skill as a cunning tactician. He saw the benefits of forming coalitions and inciting strife among his adversaries. At first, Princess Maria Martell of Dorne, a region renowned for its ferocious warriors and harsh landscape, posed a significant challenge. Aegon made a deal with the Dornish people, offering them autonomy in exchange for peace, realizing their power and the inherent difficulty of capturing their dry region. This unconventional action, a break from the usual Targaryen domination, established Dorne's neutrality, an important choice that would have long-term effects on the Targaryen dynasty. An indication of Aegon's strategic brilliance, Dorne would continue to be a pain in the Targaryen side for generations to come. But the other kingdoms were not so readily convinced. The Iron Throne itself was a goal shared by King of the Reach, Mern the Ninth Gardener, and King of the Rock, Loren Lannister. They thought their own powerful armies could match Aegon's dragons. The subsequent conflict, which will always be remembered as the Field of Fire, was a turning moment in the history of Westeros. Unimaginable destruction was unleashed by the Targaryen dragons. A she-dragon with a voracious hunger, Meraxes could consume entire companies of men with a single burning breath. The tallest and oldest of the three dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, obscured the sun with his hideous shadow. His scorching breath converted the lush plains of the Reach into a flaming hellscape and melted armor. The formerly valiant forces of the Westerlands and the Reach were completely destroyed. The enemy troops will be broken by the sheer fear of the dragons and Aegon's skilled ground soldiers. The Field of Fire turned into a horrifying representation of Targaryen's might and the terrible price of rebelling against the Dragon Lords. The conquering of Aegon wasn't without bloodshed. Fear spread over the nation as Queen Visenya, a warrior queen renowned for her cruelty, rose to prominence. In a callous demonstration of Targaryen might, the widow of Mern Gardener led the revolt, destroying entire towns and sabotaging villages. Some saw these violent deeds as reinforcing Aegon's reputation as a despot. The locals told stories of a foreign invader who reigned with fire and terror. But ultimately, after years of violent warfare, Aegon arrived at King's Landing. Without a struggle, the city submitted to the feeble and vacillating King Aegon II. With his accession to the Iron Throne, the youthful dragon lord Aegon Targaryen ushered forth a new age for Westeros. He brought the warring kingdoms together under his leadership and established a precarious peace that lasted for generations. A double-edged sword, Aegon the Conqueror's legacy. Unquestionably, Aegon Targaryen's victory altered Westeros. However, the Targaryen dynasty's foundations also contained the seeds of future war. Here, we examine the successes and setbacks that resulted from Aegon's rule as we explore deeper into the complexity of his legacy. Dorne and Unfolded Thorn. The strategic choice made by Aegon to give Dorne authority turned out to be problematic. It created a long-standing thorn in the Targaryen side, but it also avoided a drawn-out and expensive conflict. Renowned for their ferocious allegiance and unconventional military strategies, the Dornish people declined to submit to Targaryen authority. They saw the Targaryens as foreign invaders and the dragons as hideous weapons. The violent battle that lasted for several generations was the result of this seething animosity and was known as the Dornish War. With their expertise in the harsh terrain and their hit-and-run strategy, Dornish forces severely damaged Targaryen outposts and patrols. Dragonfire was not a very effective way for Aegon to conquer Dorne. The warriors from Dorne dispersed and retreated into the unforgiving terrain. This frustrating impasse demonstrated the limitations of dragons in subduing a resolute and geographically difficult land, and it strengthened Dornish resistance. The effects of the Dornish War were felt far from the battlefield. It depleted Targaryen resources, taking money and labor away from internal growth and infrastructure projects. Furthermore, the Targaryens were required to have a sizable military presence in Dorne because of the ongoing threat from the south, which contributed to the dynasty's militaristic culture. Other conquered nations felt burdened by the taxes imposed to finance the war, which added to their anger at it. The incest curse. An ethical dilemma. Targaryen incest was another aspect of Aegon's legacy that had a significant impact. This Valyrian custom, which was meant to preserve their bloodline's purity and fortify their relationship with dragons, gave rise to intense debate throughout Westeros. On the one hand, some supporters of Targaryen maintained that the Dragon Lord's unparalleled power stemmed from incest. They held that the dragons, the very cornerstone of Targaryen dominion, could only be subdued by preserving a pure lineage. Some also considered it as a representation of their Valyrian ancestry, which is a cultural tradition that ought to be honored. The majority of Westerosi, however, believed that incest was an abnormal and immoral habit. In the Seven Kingdoms, it was frowned upon for siblings to be married and have children. Both commoners and nobles were enraged by this collision of cultures. Incest opponents pointed to the chaotic behavior of several Targaryen kings as evidence that incest caused physical and mental defects within the Targaryen line. Along with fueling competing branches' frequent use of murder and betrayal in their battle for control of the Iron Throne, the practice also increased power disputes inside the dynasty. The Red Keep, an icon of oppression and power. Under Aegon's rule, King's Landing, a little coastal town, transformed. He gave the command to build the imposing Red Keep, which would house the Targaryen royal dynasty and act as their capital. The Red Keep's massive size and menacing construction acted as a continual reminder of Targaryen supremacy. It was a potent emblem that exuded unquestionable authority and invincibility. But the Red Keep also came to stand for tyranny. The royal family lived within its imposing walls, which also housed a labyrinth of prisons and torture rooms. The Red Keep, where dissidents were put down and rebels were cruelly punished, came to represent terror and power. Over the ages, this connection to despotism fostered anti-Targaryen feelings, making the very emblem of their authority a target for upcoming uprisings. The dragons, conquest tools, and rebel targets, Aegon left behind a complicated legacy that included the dragons, the greatest weapon of the Targaryens, and the key to his conquest. They were amazing animals and powerful representations of Targaryen might on the one hand. Aegon was able to quickly conquer large areas of Westeros due to their unparalleled ability to breathe fire. The dragons effectively put an end to rebellion by inspiring dread and awe in the minds of their adversaries. But there was also a great deal of bitterness toward the dragons. They were seen as devastating war harbingers by the people of Westeros. A powerful representation of Targaryen brutality, the Field of Fire was a vicious display of Dragonfire's destructive might. The reliance on dragons also produced a fragile power structure. These erratic and possibly uncontrollable animals were the foundation of the Targaryens' entire system of power. Subsequent rebellions turned their attention to this weakness. Scholars, masters, and competing houses devoted their entire thoughts to figuring out how to destroy or tame dragons. The populace became more suspicious and paranoid as a result of the fear of dragons being let loose on the land. Unity and disunity's legacy. Unifying the warring kingdoms of Westeros was one of Aegon's more lofty objectives. He saw a nation with common laws and infrastructure, ruled by Targaryen. Although there was some peace brought about by this vision, there were also new sources of conflict. The existing traditions of the conquered kingdoms frequently clashed with the imposition of Targaryen rules and practices. For example, the Reach were upset at the centralization of power in King's Landing and the loss of their chivalric code. A southern king's authority infuriated the north, which was fiercely independent and used to severe winters. The formerly autonomous kingdom's thirst for autonomy and simmering animosity were stoked by these cultural confrontations. However, Aegon's attempts at unification also created the foundation for a common Westerosi identity. The building of the King's Road, a vast highway that crossed the continent, promoted trade and travel, and allowed individuals to communicate and share ideas across geographical boundaries. A new norm for communication was established by the emergence of a common tongue that was greatly affected by the High Valyrian of the Targaryens. Though brittle, this unity was reinforced by these developments. It had never existed prior to Aegon's conquest. I have bled Westeros dry to forge a single throne. Let the realm pray no other soul ever rises with the ambition to claim it by fire and blood. The words echoed the landscapes of Westeros. The dance of the dragons, the seeds of future warfare. One of the most destructive outcomes of Aegon's legacy was the Dance of the Dragons, a civil war. Dragon Rider against Dragon Rider and brother against sister. This conflict, which was brought on by a succession issue within the Targaryen family itself, sent Westeros into a terrible phase of self-destruction. The customary Andal inheritance laws of Westeros were broken by King Viserys. The first Targaryen's choice to name his daughter Rhaenyra as his heir, despite having a male heir from his second marriage. This decision, which seemed reasonable at the time, caused conflict in the Targaryen household. After Viserys I's death, many in the kingdom supported his son Aegon II, believing that a male heir should take precedence over a female. This led to a fierce power struggle. During the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryens destroyed their own army and entire areas by letting loose their dragons on one another. The Targaryen dynasty was severely damaged by the battle, which also damaged their relationship with the populace and their ability to maintain power. The once invincible dragons, emblems of Targaryen power, turned into messengers of mayhem and devastation. A man of contradictions, Aegon Targaryen. One of the most complicated and divisive characters in Westeros's history is still Aegon Targaryen. He was a cunning tactician, a merciless invader, and a visionary leader who brought a divided continent together. However, his reign was marked by internal contradictions. His methods were frequently violent, and the seeds of future wars were sown. The tale of Aegon is a powerful reminder of the dual nature of power. It exposes the destructive nature of unbridled ambition and emphasizes the transforming power of leadership. His influence has persisted throughout Westeros's history, demonstrating the lasting power one person may have over a country's destiny. Though my reign may end, the age of dragons has just begun. Beware the shadows they cast, for they will dance in the skies long after I am gone. A storm of fire and blood is coming, a dance that will determine the fate of this land. Laying the prophecy for the House of Dragons, Aegon's mouth whispered the above words, predicting the beginning of a lethal game. The game of fire and blood, where the cities turn to ashes and the stone melts to the bone. The game for the throne. The Game of Thrones.